Oh, okay, got it. So last spring, I walked the Camino de Santiago, specifically the Portuguese coastal route, with my husband, Scott, and two friends, Jane and Lori. And I don't know if they're on today. I don't see them, at least not yet. That's my husband adjusting the screen, excuse me. Right? We walked starting in Porto, Portugal to Santiago de Compostela in Spain. I'll be talking about our journey, starting with some history of the Camino. Then I'll share photos as I talk about our travels and experiences along the way. You'll be able to ask questions and make comments at the end of the presentation. Little history about the Camino. The Camino de Santiago de Compostela, the translation actually, Camino is translated to the way. De Santiago is of St. James. De Compostela is of the field of the stars. It's been a Christian pilgrimage for more than 1,000 years to what is believed to be the site of the remains of St. James, an apostle of Jesus. St. James reportedly preached on the Iberian Peninsula in what is now Spain, and then returned to Jerusalem, where he was beheaded by Herod. The story goes that his body was transported to Galicia in northwestern Spain by two disciples in a boat led by angels. 900 years later, a hermit had a vision in which he saw a field of stars that led him to an ancient tomb that contained 3 bodies. The remains were declared to be St. James, Santiago, and his 2 disciples, and Santiago became the patron saint of the kingdom. A small village named Campos de la Stella and a monastery were established on the site. This became an important Christian pilgrimage. Construction of the Romanesque Cathedral in Santiago began in 1078, and the pilgrimage reached its peak in the Middle Ages, with the 12th and 13th centuries drawing as many as 250,000 pilgrims a year. Besides being moved by their faith, medieval pilgrims were seeking forgiveness, salvation, paying a penance, and adventure. And some pilgrims were paid to make the journey on behalf of others who wanted absolution. From a political perspective, it was a way to have more presence by the church in its struggle against the Moors who had conquered parts of Spain. Commercial businesses were established to support the pilgrims, as were monasteries, pilgrim hospitals, bridges, and other infrastructure. And communities developed along the way. It's been said that Europe was born on the pilgrimages. This is because pilgrims began from their homes throughout what became Europe and traveled through each other's regions, allowing the mixing of culture and language. The scallop shell, which you can see here, this is the one I carried, has been worn by pilgrims throughout the centuries, as it represents the many paths of the Camino coming together to one place, Santiago. The Camino was a known route actually before Christianity. By following the Milky Way in the night sky to Finisterre on the Atlantic coast of Galicia, pre-Christians believed they would reach the end of the world. Finisterre is just a short distance west of Santiago, near the westernmost point in Europe. It also was part of a Roman trade route. A resurgence in walking the Camino began in the 1990s. In 2015, the year I completed my first Camino with Scott, there were over 260,000 pilgrims who registered and received a Compostela, or certificate of completion. And that means that there were many more because not everybody completes. In 2019, the number was almost 350,000. The COVID pandemic years of 2020 and 2021 had far fewer walkers. However, It appears that in 2022, when statistics are completed, there will be record numbers. There are many routes starting from many countries. By far the most popular is called the Française, which starts in France, close to the border of Spain, and ends almost 500 miles away, actually a little more than 500 miles away, at Santiago de Compostela. This is the route Scott and I took in 2015. However, the Portuguese Camino is also well-traveled. Today, there are many reasons that people walk the Camino: religion, spirituality, adventure, introspection, challenge, community. The Camino is traveled by people from all over the world and of all religions. It includes people who are religious and those who are not, as well as people of all ages, and equally divided between women and men. People in wheelchairs have completed the trek with the help of others who have pushed them. So, visiting Porto and the Douro Valley. Before we started walking, we took a few days to visit Porto in Portugal and the Douro Valley, which is close to it. I usually do that, take a few days before I start walking, to give myself time to get over jet lag, to become familiar with the country, and to feel ready for the challenge of day after day walking. Porto, the second largest city in Portugal after Lisbon, has an estimated population of 232,000. However, the metropolitan area population, that the bigger area around it, is 1.7 million. It's located along the Douro River in northern Portugal, and the historic center is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Port wine, one of Portugal's most famous exports, is named after the city. Celtic people were among the first known inhabitants. Archaeological findings reveal that there were human settlements at the mouth of the Douro River as early as 8th century BC, which hints to a Phoenician trading settlement there. During the Roman occupation of the Iberian Peninsula, the city developed as an important commercial port. Porto fell under the control of the Moors during the invasion of the Iberian Peninsula in 711. So now I'm going to start my photos, and hopefully this goes smoothly. We'll take a minute. Share.
Wow.
And let's start at the beginning. Okay, I hope everyone can see that. This is a photo of just outside of Porto. It actually might be part of Porto, I'm not sure, but this is what I saw coming in, when I was approaching from the airport. And you can see how steep and hilly it is. This is a view of the historic center on the right of Porto, right on the river. You can see there's a bridge. There are actually multiple bridges crossing the river. This is basically a similar view. One of the things I want to point out, oops, lost it. One of the things I want to point out down here, see all these white little squares? These are all restaurants with outdoor areas. I don't know if that's new because of COVID, but the whole front of the area are various restaurants. And this is the old section, and we stayed in the old section. Okay. The Dom Luis I Bridge, which crosses the Douro River, was completed in 1886. Its 564-foot span was then the longest of its type in the world. The top level is used for the Porto metro trains with an option for pedestrians. The lower level carries traffic and also pedestrians. The bridge was designed by Theophile Seyrig, who worked with Gustav Eiffel, Gustave Eiffel designed another bridge in Porto and became so angry at his protege for completing the Dom Luis Bridge first that he no longer would work with him. There's 6 bridges actually crossing the Douro, and we crossed over the top of this. It was really a great view, and that's how I got those pictures that you just saw of the city. Here's some views of different parts of the historic center. This is the view we had from our Airbnb apartment. This is just a little cafe. And there are, of course, many little cafes mixed in among the buildings. Wow. Another view. And this is a rooftop view. You can see it's actually a lot bigger than you might think, right? This blue and white tile I will talk about later. It's classic and to Porto and actually to Portugal. So sometimes it's on the outside of buildings and sometimes it's in buildings. This is the Catholic Cathedral, which is the start of the pilgrimage. It's, of course, in the historic center. Up a ways, we had to hike up a little bit of those hills to go and visit. Construction was started in the 12th century and completed in the 1700s. As a result, it is a blend of architectural styles, Romanesque, Gothic, and finally Baroque. This is the cloisters. You'll see, again, this is another photo of the cloisters. Again, you see the blue and white tile. Some photos inside the cathedral. And piece of art. The cathedrals just contain so much of the art. So Laurie and Jane, this is a picture of the Douro Valley wine region. Laurie and Jane both really wanted to visit the Douro Valley wine region. And we ended up hiring a really wonderful private guide. It's about an hour-and-a-half drive from historic Porto. And as you can see, this is a stunningly beautiful, steep, terraced wine region. Maybe one of the most beautiful wine regions I've ever seen. The valley has been inhabited since prehistoric times. The terraces, mostly hand-built in the last few centuries, have enabled this to become a major wine region. We visit a small family winery and the very large Sandeman winery, which is way up at the top. And this is how you get in 2 places at once. This is a view from the top, little trick photography done by our guide. Back down on the bottom, we took a short trip on the river. So a little bit about the blue ceramic tiles. We saw lots of examples with blue, white, and sometimes yellow. But among the most beautiful and interesting is at the train station in this small town of Pinau in the Douro Valley. This shows scenes of people carrying baskets of grapes up the terraced hills, which is actually what happened. Historically, the tile in Portugal is traced back to the 13th century when the Moors were taking over parts of Portugal and Spain. Apparently, the style was popularized in the 16th century when the King of Portugal saw the tile work in Seville. The blue and white color is believed to be influenced by porcelain designs from China. While being decorative, the tile also helped to waterproof and insulate walls. I'm just going to take a little drink of water. So here we are starting our walk. It's June 3rd, 2022, and we're outside Jane's Hotel, about to start. You can see our packs. This is what we carried. This is a map of the Portuguese Camino. The Portuguese Camino can start in Lisbon, but we chose to start further north in Porto. Actually, most pilgrims start in Porto. The route from Lisbon to Porto is less scenic and is, of course, longer. The Portuguese Camino is about half in northern Spain. Half in northern Portugal and half in Spain. The dark green is Portugal, the light green is Spain. I just need to get rid of this thing on the left. Sometimes I may have to do this. This is a little bit more of a close-up map. So I can actually show you, I think, and you might be able to follow where we walked. This is Porto down here, and it's right along this river, and then we're along the coast, mostly the coastal route, up through here, up through here. So this is only what we did in Portugal. Actually, this is wrong. We went up this way. And the central Portuguese route, which is probably more traveled, goes up like here. So the two main paths are the classic inland central and the coastal. There are also two partial routes, the Senda Litoral, which is absolutely along the coast, but it's only partial. And in the north, from Padrón in Spain, is the spiritual variant, which takes what is believed to be the actual route of St. James's body. We walked a combination of these routes. The Senda Litoral, where we could follow it, the coastal for the bulk of the time we walked, and then the spiritual variant. And we used the inland route from Padrón, because basically I think that's the only choice. Let me do my next one. The symbols of the Camino are how you find your way on the Camino. The yellow arrow and the shell, seen in tiles embedded on streets of towns and on concrete pedestals, on the sides of buildings, and lots of other places. It's well marked, but because we often traveled right along the coast, we actually just used the coastline often as our marker. So we started to walk from Porto to Matosinhos, which was our first stop, which is actually not that far. We did our walk in more days than a lot of people do because that was what we chose to do. So we're along the river, and this is a cable car that kind of reminded us of, it's actually not a cable car, but it's an electric car that reminded us of San Francisco. Then pretty quickly, we reached the ocean on the outskirts. And here's some beautiful photos, and it is a beautiful coastline, which we enjoyed a great deal. So today we're only walking 7 miles to, it's almost a suburb of Matosinhos. Notice the boardwalks. A lot of our coastal walking is on boardwalks. It certainly makes it a little easier. Matosinhos is a port city renowned for its many amazing fish and seafood restaurants. Here's a market. We had some incredible food here. So where do you stay? Logistics. Probably most pilgrims stay in albergues. They're hostels for pilgrims, mostly dorms with shared bathrooms, maybe a kitchen, inexpensive, and a great place for Camino camaraderie. Many people stay in a combination: albergues, hostels, small hotels, B&Bs, guest houses, hotels. Often pilgrims find where they will sleep each day, but more and more walkers are reserving in advance due to COVID having closed down lodging and increased numbers of people walking, making accommodation sometimes difficult to find on the same day. We reserved our entire trip in advance, which limited our flexibility, but ensured we had lodging. We also chose to stay in private rooms, definitely a more upscale way to go. We planned to carry our packs and packed as lightly as possible. So as you can see, it's a beautiful rocky coast with occasional sandy beaches. And we pass sand dunes, and here's some flowers and sand dunes, some more sand dunes. And this area of rectangular tanks was used for salting fish. It's left by the Romans, 3rd and 4th century AD. It's so unusual that it's a national monument. This is a major fishing area, as you can see by the traps and other fishing gear. And just a nice beach. So here is Lori in the front, Jane and Scott on one of the more elaborate boardwalks. What we expected to be 13 miles, this is our second day, turned into 15 to the town of Villa de Condo. It's a pretty town, and the streets are decorated with all kinds of neon lights and patterns. There is some festival going on, we think, but we never figured out what it was. The next day, as we move through town, we pass an old church, something that happens a lot, some colorful buildings, field of flowers, and after about 11 miles, find the adequate but less than charming guest house that I had reserved online. Though we do go for a great swim at the nearby beach and enjoy a glorious sunset from our terrace. And here we are. We're looking pretty good after a bunch of miles. So this is definitely a sign for walkers. Besides Santiago, as you see on the top, it names many of the Camino locations. At the bottom, Fatima, at the very bottom in blue, is a different pilgrimage. Its arrows, which are in blue, are pointing south, while the Camino is pointing north. We're inland for much of today's walk along the way. This is a statue of St. James as a pilgrim. Sometimes we see this kind of statue or some kind of statue. And here we are at a cafe for a break. One of the great things about walking the Camino, any Camino, is that you get to stop along the way, and we're always looking for a cafe. Then we're walking through a suburban community of homes with some beautiful rocky hills just close above us. Our destination today is an old manor house, partially converted to a guest house, with lovely grounds, including a pool. This is a place I could have stayed longer, but we just didn't have the time and moved on. The food in Portugal is absolutely wonderful. This is bacalhau. It's dried salted cod imported from Norway, and it has been a staple in the Portuguese diet for centuries. It doesn't sound all that appetizing, but we loved it. The fish is soaked for at least 5 days to remove the salt and to reconstitute it, and then cooked in a variety of ways, often accompanied with crispy fried potatoes. The Portuguese prefer it to fresh cod, and it has kind of an interesting texture. Northern coastal Portugal is quite green and lush because it does rain. This is the inside of a church, small, elaborately decorated, but very peaceful. Walking along the way, sometimes we come upon places that support pilgrims. This spot on the edge of a walkway has fruit, snacks, and drinks for a donation. Help yourself, take a rest, and then be on your way. Historically, the pilgrims used gourds to carry water. And these here are just for decoration, but they're kind of a message to let us know that this is a spot to welcome pilgrims. Tonight, we're staying in a medium-sized city, Viana do Castelo, after walking about 10.5 miles. We're not sure why this street is decorated with umbrellas, but it is kind of fun. The next day, we start walking through a wooded area, and then we're back on the coast in light rain. We've got our rain gear and umbrellas. This is an old windmill without the blades, turned into a living space. Actually, we see quite a few of these in some areas along the coast. Then you can see us making our way along the ruin of an old fort. We love the boardwalks, less muddy. The coast is still beautiful in the rain, and the rain just keeps everything green. We're back through a residential area. This style church is quite typical. It appears to be more modern, but I really don't know much about it. I just wanted to show it because I saw the style frequently. More beautiful coast bordering a small town with a few restaurants and guest houses, one of which we are sleeping in tonight. Bom Camino, that's Portuguese. It means good way, and it's the Portuguese greeting for pilgrims. In Spain, the greeting is buen camino, that's Spanish. So despite that this route is really a mix of pilgrims, vacationers, and locals, there are times that the Camino part is noted by the community. Just an old stone home along this beautiful, beautiful coast. So as we're walking along, we see a few goats. It's not very usual along the coast. And I'm going to play this video. That's Jane saying hi to the goats. And that's a little bit of wind. So sweet. It's Jane again. She loves those animals. Hello, sweetie. Another church of the typical kind. This one is an older church. It looks like Romanesque to me. And we are in the town of Camino, which is on the Camino River. And that is the last place that we will be staying in Portugal. We passed through an ancient gate, typical also in old historic towns or parts of towns. This is a plaza, typical in Portugal and in Spain. You can see that there are chairs for restaurants. Often there are restaurants in the plazas. So the river borders with Spain right here, and we have to cross the river. We are staying in a guest house hostel, which has a number of pilgrims staying there as well. And the hostel helps us figure out our options for crossing the river. There used to be a regular ferry, but since COVID, that no longer runs. Instead, there are private boats taking people across from Camino. We opt for the boat service that picks us up at the hostel and drives us to where the boat launches. It's a longer drive than we expected, and we are hoping for the best. It turns out our walking friend Alice from Germany, who you'll meet later, is staying somewhere else. She crosses at a different place, so we don't see her till later that day. The boat captain doesn't speak much English, but we are waiting for we don't know what until a whole pack of bicyclists show up speaking Portuguese and loads one of the two boats. It's a little crazy, but the river is quite calm and it's a great short ride across. And then we're in Spain. We walk up from the beach to the pathway. It's a map of Spain, the Spain portion of this route. So we're here, kind of close to the town of Algarda. Today we're going to be walking to Bayona, and the route will take us here up to Pontevedra, where you can choose to stay continuing on the route that we're on, or you can stay what's called the spiritual variant. And we chose the spiritual variant. Okay. We passed this unusual artwork painted on this grove of trees. As you walk along and view the grove from different angles, the art on multiple trees becomes visible as one piece. And if you look closely, this tree is way far in the background. So the artist has drawn on this double trunk here, and also on this tree way in the background. And if you walk over here, you're not going to see this whole piece of artwork. It was really great fun. Then we're along the beautiful Atlantic coast again, this time in Spain. The shore here is quite rocky, not a lot of beaches. The town of Garda has a beautiful beach in an inlet. People are using it. Some fun murals. We pass a class in front of this coastal fortification. There is always history mixed with modern life. Just a beautiful ocean shot. And then a group of teenagers who are out cleaning up the coast and are very happy to interact with us, despite that we don't speak their language. Well, actually, most of us don't. In Spain, we find less English knowledge. In Portugal, more of the Portuguese speak English. Lori, who's right here in the middle, can communicate pretty well in Spanish, and thankfully it came in handy lots of times. My Spanish is pretty rudimentary. I can understand one word at a time. In Spain, there's several partial days where we are walking right next to a main busy road, but thankfully there are these yellow biking lanes that we can use. Still not our favorite, but they actually weren't bad. We usually had nice views from the road. We are coming into the town of Oia, which we loved. We had a recommendation from some pilgrims in the US to stay at La Cala, an albergue in Oia. We were able to secure 2 private rooms with shared baths, and we were very welcomed. It's a small village that's quite picturesque with an old monastery, a small beach, and 2 very good restaurants. La Cala, where we stayed, is the green building right up above this restaurant. The restaurant wasn't very full. It was actually quite a large area because it had just reopened. Views of the ocean. And you finally get to meet Alice, our friend from Germany. Here we are in our dress-up clothes, enjoying some wine. Oh, the sunset. Beautiful sunset from that spot. The next morning we're leaving, and you can see the street is wet, but it's not from rain. It's from being hosed down to clean the street, something we see a lot in Spain. And the views leaving Oia. Our next stop is the town of Bayona to stay in the Parador. In Spain, the government has set aside and restored close to 100 castles, monasteries, fortresses, manor houses, convents that are historically and architecturally significant, that are now 4- and 5-star hotels. They're definitely a splurge for a pilgrim, but they're marvelous places to stay. In Bayona, the Parador is an old fortified castle. We were tired after hiking 11 or more miles and couldn't quite figure out where the entrance to the hotel was. So Scott led us up here onto the battlements, and we walked along for quite a way, looking at beautiful coastal views from this peninsula. But I have to say, my patience was wearing a little thin, as I just wanted to get to where we were, put down our packs before we explored. Eventually, we found the entrance to the hotel. It's a massive property and a massive hotel, beautifully decorated with historic art. Our room, way at the end, was near the outdoor swimming pool. It's definitely a luxury. And here's a gate into the fortress. So Lori and I decided we would stay the next day and explore rather than do the walk. And we wandered the property for hours. This is a public beach right on the edge of the fortress. Lots of people. It was warm. some other views. Okay, this, I'm going to go back because this is the next day. So Jane and Scott decided that they would walk. It was about 15 miles, first through pretty rugged terrain, and then about 5 miles through the city construction. Lori and I took a taxi to our next stop, which was Vigo. We were in the historic area of Vigo, which is also a port city, and right off the coast of the beautiful Seis Islands. It's a national park that one can reach by ferry, and this is the view coming in on the ferry. It's among the most beautiful beaches in Europe, we've been told, and it was quite beautiful. We hadn't scheduled an extra day to visit the islands, but after hearing a lot about it, Lori really wanted to go. So we decided we'd skip our walk and just go to the Seas Islands for the day. Beautiful hiking, beautiful views. This is all the Seas Islands. Oh, it's not moving. There it is. This is a beach that we stopped at. It was actually a nude beach, but we didn't see a lot of nude people. We liked it because it wasn't that crowded. None of the beaches were that crowded, but so the next day we're walking again, and the trail leads us inland. After we climb a hill, we find a beautiful old fountain. That's me. Perfect resting place. And here are these two painted hiking shoes that direct pilgrims to Santiago, the yellow shoe, and to the Fatima pilgrimage, the blue shoe. We pass a lovely field of flowers, and then another small town with a pretty big arrow. As we climb through the town, you'll notice the rectangular box up here, right over here. This is a corn crib it's called a oreo, for storing corn to keep out animals. Oreos are seen in lots of places in northern Spain. Here's the inside of just a lovely little peaceful church. Then back through wooded countryside next to this beautiful stream. And as we approach the town of Pontevedra, we are traveling under a bridge with this beautiful mural painted in the most unlikely place. It's kind of muddy and dirty under there, but there is this gorgeous mural. Then to Pontevedra, which is a lovely historical town. This is a chapel built in the 18th century on the Camino route in Pontevedra. From Pontevedra, we're taking the spiritual variant, a path that follows the route taken by the body of St. James, according to the story. It adds an extra day for most, but since some of the hiking distances are quite long and some of it's steep, we decide to split one of the days in half, giving us 4 days total on this section. This day takes us through vineyards, beautiful green stretches. And as we're approaching our next stop, a hotel on the edge of Cambaro, we're back along the Atlantic Ocean. Cambaro is on an inlet. Unbeknownst to us, actually, Cambaro turned out to be a picturesque fishing village. The streets go literally down to the water. And there are many oreos, structures built on stilts for drying and storing corn. And I believe in this town also fish. Behind each house, there is at least one. Here, there's 3 of them. Very typical throughout Galicia, but I've never seen so many in one place. This looks like paella, but it's called arroz con mariscos, rice with seafood. Whatever you call it, it was delicious and part of a feast that we could hardly finish. There were multiple restaurants in this fishing village. It's a little bit of a tourist town, but this one, excuse me, but this one was recommended by our hotel. We loved everything about it, right over the water with a friendly and knowledgeable waiter. And here we are having a good time in our dressed up clothes, watching kayaks go by and other activity on the water. It is an inlet, which is, even though it's along the Atlantic, which is why you can see the coast across. On our way the next day, views of the town and water as we climb up. We stayed in this active monastery, which rents rooms to a handful of pilgrims. We expected austerity, but in fact, the rooms were very nice, including soap made at the monastery. Here's a little closer look of the front. We were, and a nun and monk that Scott chatted with, and the cloisters. We were invited to join their evening service as observers, and it was quite beautiful, a peaceful place to stay. This is the second stage on our third day on the spiritual variant. It's over 15 miles through some dense green forest along a stream with frequent small waterfalls. The area also has numerous ancient grain mills, originally powered by the stream, but no longer used, but many still standing at least partly. Note the stone structure and the round grinding wheel, and Scott and Jane. It's an absolutely beautiful stretch that goes on for quite a while. This was just so lovely. It's a little bit more of a challenging walk, not that much, but we really enjoyed it. Then we arrive at an outdoor museum just in the middle of the forest, depicting life in Galicia in the past. Quite a unique way to share cultural history. This is a mother with 2 children. This is a model of a kitchen, a pig. There were a lot more of different things that I didn't photo. Here's Jane and, I'm sorry, that's Lori and Scott on stepping stones to cross the stream. Then we're going through vineyards again. And happily, we find a bar cafe. So in Spain, a bar has coffee, snacks, wine, food, kind of everything. How fun it is to be able to take a break and get a café con leche, the Spanish coffee with steamed milk. And here's Lori eating toasted bread with tomato, egg, and avocado, a great meal or snack for a hiker. This is what an albergue looks like, or one of them. We are in the coastal town of Villanova de Arosa. This is a 4-bed dormitory that we shared. The photo is in the morning as we're getting ready to leave. Today, we're going to be taking a boat that is said to have followed the path of St. James's body from Villanova de Arosa up the river or Rio Ulla. It's a small boat, but a lovely ride. Passing crosses placed on rocks. We saw several of these. Here are 2 Viking ship replicas, interesting stone ruin, just a few of the interesting sites that we passed. We arrive at Porto de Pontescuras. Here's Jane crossing over the bridge, and then we walk a couple of miles to the town of Padrón. Padrón can also, pilgrims can also walk and reach Padrón by walking instead of taking the boat. I think it's about 15 miles and it's a lot of road walking, so we preferred boat ride. Padrón is a crossroads on this Camino and home of Padrón peppers. We see a lot of pilgrims here. It's a charming historic town said to be the starting point of St. James Ministry. There are many interesting sites in this town, more than we can actually see in the half day that we are here. This is the Fuente del Carmen, a water fountain at the bottom. In the middle, I don't know how well you can see it, is a kind of relief carving of St. James's boat. There's a convent from which there are beautiful views of the town. We had to climb up to it. Climbing further, this site is where Lori is standing, is said to be the site where St. James first preached. Here's a view of Padrone. This stone pillar is inside a church and is said to be the post to which St. James's boat was tied. Padrone is a great town to walk around in. There are lots of shops, cafes, restaurants, and we stayed in a really great little apartment here. From here, we're on the Portuguese Central Route. And if we wanted to walk 17.5 miles, we could make it to Santiago in one day. We're leaving in the light rain, as you can see. The structure on the right, which you can't see all that well, is a place for washing clothing. And we see these a number of times on our walks. Here's a photo of a different one that's more close up that gives you an idea. So it's a place for washing clothing that was used in the past. I don't believe it's still in use. So on June 20th, excuse me, I'm trying to find myself. On June 20th, the 18th day of our pilgrimage, we start out for Santiago. We pass this large garden with scarecrow children, mural on the outskirts of Santiago, and these two posts telling us that there are two ways we can walk into town. Notice our smiles. We know we're getting close, and we've gotten used to the light rain. It's not bothering us at all, and we're pretty excited right now. And here we are, the cathedral in Santiago, and we have made it. Lori and I actually were the first to reach because Scott was busy chatting with somebody. The plaza in front is large, and despite the light rain, there are always pilgrims and other visitors. Here are Scott and I holding our stamped Camino passports. Most every place we stopped or stayed gave us a stamp showing us we had been there. These are presented at the pilgrim office in Santiago. And if they show that you've walked at least 100 kilometers to Santiago, which is a little more than 60 miles, you're given a Compostela, a certificate with your name written in, saying that you completed the Camino de Santiago. Both are great souvenirs of the adventure. Here's just a close-up of the top of the middle of the cathedral. A congratulatory lunch with some friends in Santiago, which is a great fun city, filled with pilgrims and other visitors. Lots of restaurants, shops, interesting architecture. It's basically a kind of almost a party. And also interesting sights to see. A side entrance of the cathedral with lots of people gathered. Inside is the main altar, elaborately decorated in gold. These angels are quite large, and in the center is the Bottofameria, the very large censer that is swung to send incense into this cathedral. Now, there are a couple of other things inside the cathedral, a pilgrim statue. These men are preparing to swing the Bottofameria, and here it goes. Just a close-up view of the Bottofameria. Another one You know, the cathedral isn't very full in this photo, which is unusual, but we learned from Alice, who found out from somebody that they don't swing it every mass. So we knew it was going to be swung. So we came in and there were not a lot of people in it, but we've been there when it has been packed. And here we are, final dinner with Lori, Jane, Alice, myself, and Scott. So that's our journey, and I'd love to have answer questions. And